great to see again today. We've done almost 600,000 doses yesterday, so the data is a day old effectively, and the bulk of which are second doses. April has been second dose month. I thought I would just share with you some of my reflections on the journey that we've been on, and then where I think we're going to head to as well, and then take questions. Very happy to answer any questions that you might have. So when the Prime Minister asked me to take on this role back in November, he very much wanted me to focus on the deployment. We had been focusing in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and I'm the Business and Industry Minister, on the Vaccines Task Force, which when he set up back in March of last year, of 2020, he gave us two priorities. One is to discover the vaccine that will work. So we audited all the different vaccine teams around the world, produced a short list of about 24 under the great Kate Bingham, and then begun negotiations with a number of those and landed on 7. We were the first country to negotiate with a small German bio company called BioNTech, even before they'd done their deal with Pfizer. When they did do their deal with Pfizer, we were the first to contract with them and the first to deploy at scale the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine back in December, if you recall, 8th of December. And we went further with the Oxford team because, one, we were already funding the Oxford team probably since 2016 through UKRI, and we were able to get them to pivot their research towards COVID, invest in manufacturing in Oxfordshire and Braintree and in Wales and Wrexham. And now, of course, on T side with the Novavax vaccine, which will come online shortly, and in Scotland with the Valneva vaccine. So we've got a portfolio of 8 vaccines now. We've added a new one called CureVac, which is very exciting because it's another mRNA vaccine like the Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna vaccine, but we're going to produce it in the UK. We're going to manufacture it in the UK, and it gives us the capability to produce at scale messenger RNA vaccine against any COVID virus variant. We'll be able to produce a vaccine variant, as the Prime Minister set us the challenge to be able to do that within 100 days, and that's what we're working on at the moment. So that's the supply side. Now, he also set us the priority back in March of 2020, not just to discover the vaccines under the Vaccine Task Force, but how are we going to help the rest of the world? How are we going to make sure that we leave no one behind? And one of the first things we did was the AstraZeneca Oxford team licensed the Serum Institute, the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world, at zero profit, so at cost, to allow them to produce. They're now producing 70 million doses a month, about to rise to 100 million doses a month. We put £500 million to work through the COVAX infrastructure, which will deliver vaccines to low-income countries to produce about 1 billion of those vaccines and get them distributed. They've already distributed 40 million to countries like Ghana and the Ivory Coast and the Philippines. About 100 countries have got that. Pfizer, and to be absolutely fair to their chief executive, Albert Bourla, from day one when we negotiated with him, he was talking about vaccine equality and equity, making sure that vaccine also gets to the COVAX infrastructure to be delivered to low and medium income countries. Now, that's the supply side, and I'm a chemical engineer by background, and many people on this call are in business, and are in all sorts of manufacturing and understand business. But you all know that no manufacturing process is ever without its challenges, not least vaccine manufacturing, where you're producing a biological product in the case of the Oxford vaccine and a chemical product in the case of the Pfizer vaccine. So it's always challenging and lumpy in the early days, then it stabilizes, then the team really goes back and tries to process, improve to get more efficiencies, more yield out, which is what we're doing at the moment, and it's looking good. But it's not without its challenges. So our limitation remains vaccine supply. On the deployment side, so when he asked me to then look at deployment, we effectively brought together 3 of our greatest institutions. So we've got the NHS, so hospital hubs, over 130 hospitals are vaccine hubs. The backbone of the deployment is our primary care network, so 5 or 6 GPs with about 30 to 50,000 patients on their books come together, decide who will lead, and we will support them to deploy. 2/3 of the deployment goes through primary care networks, then the national vaccination centres that you've seen set up all over the country, and of course, pharmacy, community pharmacy will have about 500 at steady state delivering the vaccine deployment. As Brigadier Phil Prosser, who some of you would have seen with the PM at the press conferences, described, he said, Minister, you know, we're basically standing up a national supermarket chain in about a month and then growing it 20% every week. That was the challenge. That's what we've had to deliver. And it's been extraordinary. The deployment infrastructure we've built can now probably do about 1 million doses a day. And our limitation is really how much vaccine we can get through. Our record was about 800,000 doses. We got to 27 jabs a second a few weeks ago. I'm very confident we will meet our target of delivering 1 dose protection for all adults by the end of July. And of course, we'll continue with second doses as they get to their 12-week period when people have to have their second dose as well. It is our way out of this pandemic to vaccinate at scale. Almost 2/3 of adults have now had the first dose. 1/4 of adults have had 2 doses. So it's been a massive achievement. We're very close now in the next few days to hit the 50 million doses administered. So, you know, an extraordinary effort. And I'll leave you with this final thought and we'll take questions. If the virus was designed to challenge liberal democracies like ours and other liberal democracies around the world, because the only way we could actually combat it, the only way we could try and bring it under control was these dreaded non-pharmaceutical interventions, the NPIs, the withdrawal of our freedoms, that severe lockdown we had to endure, all of us had to endure, the nation had to endure from December onwards, then the vaccine was really, in many ways, plays to our strength, plays to our DNA. The people of the 4 nations of this country have come together, and you've done us proud in the Northeast, genuinely, in how you've embraced this. It's that Dunkirk spirit, that 1,000 flotillas coming together, organizing and saying, you're not going to beat us. We're going to get ourselves protected. We're going to get this vaccine program, the largest in the history of the NHS, in the history of our country. We're good at organizing. We demonstrated it in the Olympics in 2012. This is a whole other scale now, but we have demonstrated yet again to the world that we're really good at this. And I have to say, you know, I stand on the shoulders of the heroes and heroines on the front line, those 80,000 vaccinator volunteers, the doctors, nurses, the GPs, the pharmacists, and of course our armed forces and those in local government who are identifying the sites that we needed for the national vaccination campaign. So thank you for having me. Great to be with you. Very happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Minister. Fantastic illustration and demonstration of the effort and energy that's gone in, with underpinned by the facts, right? So, 27 jabs in that short period of time is just truly incredible. And of course, it's a very natural thing to do, for communities and individuals, and including us, is to look at what hasn't happened or look at the negative aspects of that. It's just a human nature to sort of go, well, you didn't do this, or that hasn't happened, or all of those things, and not necessarily celebrate the incredible achievement that has happened. I'm delighted. I was really particularly enamored by your comments in regards to the armed forces, because if I have a slight criticism, it almost felt as if we hadn't acknowledged the effort and the energy of the armed forces in mobilizing the infrastructure, the Nightingale hospitals, all of that. It was almost, we rightly clapped for the NHS, but I almost felt as if there was a slight gap in not acknowledging, obviously, armed forces and the rest of the public service, but the armed forces in particular. So it was lovely to see that. A couple of questions from sort of some of the attendees. So Dr. Ram Sanasis asked about saying, although we have a problem in the UK, it's not as bad as Europe, like Germany and France and other countries. what did we do to overcome it and achieve what, in my opinion, is a successful vaccine campaign. And then the follow-on from that was, and what are we doing about sharing that more broadly with other countries? There's a further question around what does UK, why does the UK not use the reductions in overseas aid budget to supply huge amounts of vaccines made in the UK to those who need them? But you've just talked about that that program whereby we're doing an aspect of that in any regard. But I'll let you answer that rather than me, because it's a question to you. And a further one there is about inequalities and not just race inequalities, age inequality as well. So we have seen this in the press, in that the vast majority of people who want to go out and who want to socialize tend to be younger people. And when we're talking about passports and such like, well, clearly, if they haven't been vaccinated, then the likelihood is they're not going to be able to, and if they're being prohibited. So there's a few, I think, legitimate good questions. And then one final one, and then I'll let you answer them, please, is we're fortunate to be in a positive situation regarding the great achievement of the vaccine rollout. Can you add some further details on next steps in the rollout? And that's from Lieutenant Colonel Andy Black. And I'll pause there if I may.
Thank you very much, Amar. Really great questions, all of them. Let me try and take them in reverse order. So, Andy, really great question on the next step. So what we are now preparing for is the ability to offer a booster jab, and the clinicians, the scientists, Chris Whitty, our Chief Medical Officer, the Chief Medical Officers of Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, will decide as to when is the right time to boost that immunity, especially for the most vulnerable cohorts. If you remember, we began vaccination on the 8th of December with Pfizer-BioNTech, and 4th of January with AstraZeneca Oxford. With the category 1 was the residents of care homes and those who look after them. Category 2, the over 80s, then the over 75s and the over 70s, and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable. Those 4 categories, 88% of mortality to COVID. Now, at some point, their immunity will begin to wane. We also have to keep an eye on variant viruses that may need additional protection from. So the strategy at the moment is has 3 pillars. One is negotiating with the current manufacturers and placing orders with them for additional vaccine supplies for that booster jab whenever it comes. So you heard the announcement today of an additional 60 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech that we have contracted. We're talking to AstraZeneca about their variant vaccine that they are developing with the Oxford team. We're talking to Moderna as well. And we've got Novavax, which already looks good against both the dominant strain in the UK, which is the Kent strain, and against the South African strain. That's going to be made on Teesside and filled and finished at Barnard Castle. And then, of course, we've got Valneva, which is made in Scotland. That the current vaccines work on the spike of the virus. Valneva itself, the vaccine, is a whole inactivated virus. So we have real potential for a vaccine that could work even more effectively if that is at all possible. And so that's what first part of the strategy. Second part is giving us the capacity to manufacture any vaccine variant to deal with any virus variant, and that's the CureVac deal I spoke about earlier in my presentation. So giving us messenger RNA technology is clearly proven by Moderna and by BioNTech to work. We think it has potential to give us that flexibility to produce a vaccine variant, no matter what the virus does in terms of mutations. Really important to effectively to future-proof the vaccination program. We've ordered 50 million of those. Manufacturing will happen in the UK. Their attraction, they're a German company. I think 13% is owned by the German government, in fact, is that we're able to give them a library of all the the sequencing of all the different variants of the virus, because we account for just under 50% of all sequencing that happens in the world. The UK is a superpower when it comes to genome sequencing of the virus. So that's the other strand. And of course, as I described to you, the third is the manufactured vaccines in the UK, like Novavax and Valneva. So we've got a strategy for the autumn. The clinicians will have to decide when we go. The deployment part of that is we have to be ready whenever they want to press the button. So the NHS is already making plans for how we deploy from September onwards, and how that dovetails with our flu vaccination program, the autumn flu vaccination program. And then ultimately, we're going to have to live with this virus, as Jonathan Van Tam and Chris Whitty have talked about. And we think it'll move from being a pandemic to endemic. What does that mean? It'll be much more like the flu virus, and we will effectively inoculate every year. We'll have an annual COVID and an annual flu vaccination program. That is why we're building so much manufacturing capacity in the UK. By next year, we will be able to produce something like 700 million doses a year of vaccines and be one of the leading vaccine manufacturers in the world. So that's really important. On the aid budget, even with us tightening our belt, sadly, because of what we're having to endure in terms of economic challenge because of COVID, we're still spending £10 billion. I think we're the third largest aid provider now out of the G7 to the world. So that continues at pace. At the moment, sadly, we don't have excess doses. We have ordered and we've got big plans for the future in terms of the vaccine supplies, and we have already where the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary have already been on record to say the moment we have excess doses, we will share the bulk of those with the COVAX infrastructure I spoke about earlier. But we're not waiting there. We're already licensing serum to produce, as I said, 70 million vaccines a month. We're putting $500 million to produce 1 billion doses to distribute to those countries. 40 million has already landed, and more will land over the coming weeks and months, because no one is safe until we are all safe. On the issue of inequalities, you're absolutely right. And I launched a uptake strategy for the vaccination program back on the 13th of February, looking at both ethnicity and other inequalities, working with local government, sharing data, sharing information, looking at what the barriers are to allowing people to be vaccinated. One of the things we discovered is, of course, by sharing that data and analyzing it, that people will get vaccinated if they trust the venue and the people delivering the message. Hence why we've had vaccinations in the Al Hikma Center and in Batley and in the mosques in Birmingham and London and elsewhere, and in Gurdwaras and in churches, black churches. It's really working well, and we're seeing an exponential uptake from, for example, the Bangladeshi and the Pakistani community already. And then we're sharing the best practice across local government and the NHS to continue to deliver that. On passports, I just want to spend a little bit of time explaining to you exactly what we're doing. So on international travel, clearly a number of countries have already indicated to us they're going to require a vaccine certification to allow people to travel in the way they already require, in the way we ourselves already require a pre-departure test certificate. People have tested negative 72 hours before departure. That technology and operation, so both digital and in hard copy letter, we are already operationalizing and will be ready by the 17th of May. Why? Because we want our citizens to be able, if they need to travel, in the way people have had in the past to carry a yellow fever, vaccination passport to certain countries in Africa and elsewhere in the world, to be able to have that. But also, Grant Shapps, our Transport Secretary, is chairing the G7 transport ministers meeting because we want to shape the travel protocols to our advantage, our citizens' advantage. So that's the first part of it. To your second part, Amar, in terms of using certification in the UK domestically, we have to, I think any responsible government will want to look at the use of technology for the more challenging parts of the economy. So mass spectator sport, wouldn't we rather see Wembley Stadium for the FA Cup final to be, if we can for next year, be full, not 20% full, if we can use test certification, for example, or vaccine certification or immunity certification. So we're looking at all of that. It'll be irresponsible for us not to. Now, that is not to say that we shouldn't answer the really difficult questions, that we can't create a system that is in any way discriminatory or places a burden, additional burden on whether it's business or people. Hence why what the Prime Minister said is, look, let Michael Gove look at this properly, review it and report to him before the June deadline, which is when we want to see that 21st of June, where we hopefully, if the roadmap continues to be delivered, and at the moment the good news is we're not seeing any evidence to lead us to believe that we can't deliver the 17th of May and then hopefully the 21st of June. Both dates have that gap of 4 weeks of data collection and then a week of analysis, so that we can get there and get there this time permanently and never have to go back again.
Fantastic. Thank you, Minister. You've actually, I appreciate you had a really tight time slot for us, and ever so grateful for you extending that time slot. That's because obviously it's the Northeast, and we are broadcasting live on Spice FM, which is a radio station, and we're broadcasting digitally, globally through our various channels. And everything that you just shared and highlighted clearly demonstrates the confidence and the competence in the plan, and that's why people should equally be confident in taking the vaccine and encouraging everybody to do so, and not listen to the myths or disinformation that we touched upon earlier on, and really come out of this so that we can on the 17th enjoy that time together, and then in June hopefully go on holiday, which was one of the most compelling reasons for me to get the vaccine anyway. I keep laboring that point, but regardless of whatever, we're in this together, and that's the most important thing. And having such incredible leadership and by yourself, and I'm gonna end where I started in saying thank you ever so much for not only giving up your time, but actually doing what you're doing, and doing it in such a pragmatic and practical manner, but equally being very positive about it. So, keep up the incredible work on behalf of the Northeast, and indeed, I hope all of the audience here, we're ever so grateful, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadhim. Bye-bye.